Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
Now, the question is, how drunk would you have to be to put on earrings that string down under the chin and would hurt your sensitive lobes? I don't know. I'm kind of game for a lot of things, so I might not have to be all that drunk at all, but apparently there are people like Quark who they just need the proper motivation and they'll do it.
Well, he was actually quite motivated though during most of that episode for various reasons. Giving his mother a heart attack being one of them. And then the whole other thing with the entirety of the Ferengi Alliance, essentially, with Grand Exec at the head of it, also being something that was a stake.
Yeah, because despite all that Zek was doing, I mean, his dealings and blessing did help Quark quite a bit.
Yeah, and let's face it, what Zek doing during that episode was a bit of a stroke of genius. And something that, well, mirrors the real world quite a bit too. And how they kept DS9 going, we most likely have seen even more of the consequences of it.
Yeah, and for those who are wondering, we are talking about the Season 6 episode from Deep Space Nine titled Profit and Lace, where the Grand Nagus, at the behest and urging of Ishka, otherwise known as Mookie, convinced the Nagus that there was a rather large worker base and consumer base that was not being properly utilized in the Ferengi culture.
Do you mean properly utilized or exploited? Because in
Well,
Ferengi, both words are the same.
True. It is the Ferengi culture, so exploitation is accurate in this sense. And that was the females. For those who might not be as into the information as some others here, or into the lore, original, dare we say, conservative, classical Ferengi culture, females are not to be seen, not to be heard, not to be clothed. And yet, Ishka, the mother of Quark and Rom, is one of those Ferengi women, Ferengi females, that actually has the lobes for business, but also doesn't give a fuck and actually starts bucking convention. The initial bit, the initial introduction we get, she was doing her own deals, essentially running her own business and making profit, which was against the law in Ferengi society. Shortly thereafter, she ends up playing in a Tongo tournament and starts a pen pal relationship with the Grand Nagus, which turns into a romance, which Quark ends up finding out about, and is, let's just say, hilarity ensues, which is why I say the writers of DS9 really did enjoy toying with the Ferengi, Quark especially. Because this isn't the first time that Quark is dressed as a woman. It's just the first time they go to the extent that they do in this episode, which really does raise the question of, could that episode be made today in today's political climate?
Oh, hell no. That would have ended up just in the fucking scrap pile when someone mentioned it. And that person would have been fired.
Yes, I would have to concur. I do not see the script as it is written, produced, and released getting network approval in today's political climate.
And it's really sad. Because if you look at the script, if you look at the episode in total, you have the silly parts. And then you have the actual real world tie-in parts. And the real world tie-in parts are amazingly on the fucking nose. They really fit in with what's happening in the real world in regards to, say, for example, we give women rights in order to exploit it. We give them something that they want in order to make sure that they get stuck in a fucking trap. What was happening there is one of those things that's actually been mirrored in real life. And they executed expertly, despite having, Quark essentially being, he wasn't just a transvestite at that point. They changed everything.
Yeah, they went through their equivalent of hormone replacement therapy, such that Quark was still feeling the effects at the end of the episode as he's admiring a gift of a ring that that was given to him by the linchpin of the Ferengi they needed to convince to still support Zek. All right. Major, real quick plot synopsis of this episode. Zek enacts sweeping changes, allowing females full access and participation in Ferengi society, i.e. Ferengi commerce. It ends up throwing the entire economic system that they're utilizing into chaos by the massive influx of new players and hardliners not wanting to play a part in it at all, and it just ends up being a shit show. During the shit show, the FCA deposes Zek as the Nagus and replaces him with Liquidator Brunt. Sorry, acting Grand Nagus Brunt. And after that deposition and replacement, there's an election that has to take place to confirm who the next Grand Nagus is going to be. Nagus and, Zek and Ishka go to DS9 to elicit the help of Quark, Rom, and Nog. Brunt shows up, and there's one influential businessman that they have to convince to be on Zek's side. If they can get this one guy on Zek's side, Zek is reinstated as the Grand Nagus. The way they decide to go about this is to arrange a meeting between Ishka and... oh shit, what was his name?
Nilva.
Yes, Nilva, the purveyor of Sluggo Cola. But because of an argument between Quark and Ishka, she has a heart attack and ends up in the infirmary. Well, Neva is still expecting to meet with a female business associate that has been helping and guiding Zek along this path. Rom doesn't have the lobes for it. There's no other female Ferengi on the station. Naga's a Starfleet officer. He's off the board. So guess who is stuck with the deal? Quark. But Nilva is expecting a female. So they do not just cosmetic surgery, but actual chemical hormone replacement therapy, genetic therapy on Quark to make him as female as possible. And this is where some of the hilarity comes in, because now you have Lita, the Nagus, Rom, trying to teach Quark how to act feminine. And
let's face it, Rom was doing it the best.
Yes, and that's what I was about to say, is Rom was a better teacher than Lita.
After that, though, with what was going on and just how things were progressing, I would see Quark trying to come to terms with things, trying to understand, for example, how to walk in heels without cracking your ankles, which that gave him the very nice name of Jared.
Lumba. So, all right, and when I first heard it, and it came back to mind when we were watching the episode just a few days ago on the server. Whatever Lumba wants. So you gotta give the writers that much credit for and such an innocuous detail, and yet it fits. And it just adds to the entertainment value of the story being told. Because later in the episode, Brunt is not confused by this at all. Brunt catches on to what is actually taking place so fucking quick. And he actually tries to convince Neva that that's not a female. It's the bartender. It's Quark.
Not a female enough for me.
And that's where the thumbnail, I hope you guys were able to see it, the thumbnail came from. To prove his worth and to prove that Lumba was as female can be, Lumba decided to show the goods to Neville and Brunt and Brunt's servant. And it worked. The deal got done, and Zek ended up reinstated as Nagus, and all because Quark changed into Lumba and was able to explain the deal and seal the deal with a very rich, very influential, not as old, but older Ferengi.
I'd say that's the thing that most people get hung up on. And they try to make it out that, oh yes, this is a blow towards transsexuals. Oh, the entire episode is just so silly. It's Quark in drag. But if you actually look at the episode, what is it that's happening there? You have the thing with marketing this log killer towards females, or snail killer. You have the thing with, showing the other things that can be marketed towards females. trying to get everyone there really to understand that females in Ferengi society are still a thing. And you have so much of that, so much of the inter-Ferengi politics just showing up and letting us see so much of what they see as the different business planning as what can actually be invested in. Because mind you, the Ferengi are a sly bunch of fuckers. They'd sell eyes to an Eskimo, no issues. They'd also sell, colored glass to an Eskimo and try to claim its eyes. But that's kind of besides the point. They try to exploit anything and everything. Yet for some reason, they hadn't really considered the women. What does that really tell us about the Ferengi culture and how they view women?
Oh, yeah, that was actually something that was a recurring thing. The general consensus of the Ferengi society was that women had one purpose, and that was to be in the home. That's it. They weren't worthy, they weren't deserving, they weren't good enough, they were not capable enough to be anything else. And the first time this actually got challenged in Deep Space Nine was season 2? Maybe season 3?
Was it 2 or 3?
Yeah, it was 2 or 3. It was before the workers unionized. Quark had an employee who was very interested in how he was running the business and wanted to make sure that the employee wanted to make sure that everything was going good. Why? Because this employee was actually a female in disguise, and she was in love with Quark.
Not just in love. She had the lobes to actually do the business there. She was very acutely aware of how all the business transactions, etc., worked. I would say more so than Quark.
Even had ideas on how to improve the business.
Yes. And that's something Quark could have actually taken after her. And had Quark not been, well, as staunch of a traditionalist or orthodox Ferengian as he is, as he was there, he could have actually made a lot more money. He could have made so much more latinum. But he didn't. Because he didn't see it as appropriate with a female actually doing business. He's willing to let go of latinum. A Ferengi willing to lose out on latinum because of those kinds of traditions.
Yeah, and that's where he's not the only one. And for as traditional as Quark is at times, he really is a transitional character when you look at the way the Ferengi society operates. Because you have those instances where, yes, he's very staunch on those lines, but then you have other instances like, oh, I don't know, when he got stuck with the Klingons after claiming an exaggerated story about how he beat and killed a Klingon late night in his bar, only to then be abducted by the widow, Grilka, and then help her actually out of the situation in a way that was very Ferengi and actually showed just how much dishonor and duplicity does take place in the Klingon Empire. Only to then, later that season, early the next season, actually win her legitimately and get her affection and actually start a relationship with her. A Klingon. So you do have that flexibility within the character to sometimes go with the hardline stance, but also sometimes realize, hey, change can be good for business.
But we really need to address one thing there, though. His subconscious knows that most of the Ferengi stuff, like the rules of acquisition, is just a fucking hoax. It's just something that's actually made to sell. And that the first Grand Nagus knew it, and he wrote it because it sold. It made him a lot of money. He has that inside him. He knows about it. Yet he still wants to be not an active part of it, just like that, but he wants to follow
He wants to be
the
a good
spirit of it.
Ferengi.
Yeah. Because to him, the rules of acquisition is what's being a Ferengi. That's the entire point of it. If you don't follow the rules of acquisition, or if you don't try to gain profit at any level possible, you're not really a good Ferengi. And we can see how this really works out for him. We see the things that he does that the kind of un-Ferengi thing or non-Ferengi things that usually aren't mentioned, aren't really talked about. And when you see, for example, Brunt talking about what Quark was actually doing for his workers, maybe not major stuff for a human, but things that for a Ferengi is borderline fucking philanthropist.
Damn near heretical.
Yeah, we really see the way that he is different from, say, the majority of Ferengi otherwise. The Ferengi religion of the rules of acquisition being so pervasive in all other aspects of Ferengi culture. And, as I mentioned before, it's so pervasive in the Ferengi culture that they are willing to waste latinum on not actually exploiting 53 point whatever it was percent of the population. You really have to be really set in your ways. If all you care about is money and profit, and you're not willing to profit of something for the sake of, well, tradition like that, or even see it as something that can be profitable.
Well, and that's one of the things that really threw me, even back watching it the first time, is like, wait, this culture is so about profit and the gain of wealth. And they quite literally have it as one of their rules of acquisition. Treat your employees like family, exploit them. Why would they cut off a potential avenue by only dealing with other males of your species? Why would you cut out a huge chunk of your population if you actually wanted to maximize your consumer base?
And the funny thing about that too is just the Ferengi, or the Ferengi females. They have no issues dealing with Jadzia, no issues dealing with Kira. They don't have issues dealing with other species females, even being quite attracted to them. Well, we have Rom too trying to bring Lita in as a Ferengi female, but we know how that went. But we have all those things there, where it's just the Ferengi females. And that kind of brings up another rather interesting aspect of it too. Is it biological? Is it something that's hardwired in that females are seen as, say, worthless in the Ferengi society, and in them being seen as worthless, them actually being protected because he can't exploit them.
That could actually be a decent genesis for it in some headcanon, because why else would there have been such a visceral reaction and crumbling of the economic system of Ferenginar when Zek made his edict and changed the law in the way he did? And it's more than just... At some point, it was more than just a conscious decision. There was more behind it. There is more of a story on why that decision was made. And it stuck. It stuck, and it held for so many generations that original reasoning and purpose became lost to history.
Yeah, and we can't tell by the Ferengi. They will exploit anything and everything, as much and as hard as they can. But they didn't have slaves, not that I can recall at least. They didn't wage wars the same way that we did. Quark being fucking disgusted at the things that we've done to ourselves throughout history.
Oh, the recentness of the barbaric slavery, or even they irradiated themselves?
Yes. But all that shit, we can see all those things. We can see the way that Quark reacts to that. Which means that throughout history, there haven't been really any, or throughout Ferengi history, I should say, there hasn't really been the kind of aggression you see elsewhere. They've been bribing, just paying it off, or extorting others in order to gain victory for so many generations, for so many millennia, that that's become their warfare.
Yeah,
Not
it's purely economic warfare, not physical warfare, but they will defend themselves with violence when necessary.
Yeah, which in this case, what's the best way to keep something from being stolen, to keep something from being risked when it comes to all these things happening? You make it worthless.
Yeah, I was gonna say you craft and manipulate the information to the point that to an outsider it is seemingly worthless. Because as was mentioned with Ram and his first wife, that there was a commodities trade that was tied in with marriage in Ferengi culture originally. It wasn't Marriage wasn't a pairing of emotional attachment and bonding. You get that in affluent societies that can afford it. Otherwise, marriage, it's a part of the economic traditions. It's a part of the transactional nature of supply and demand interactions between differing peoples and or groups. And the Ferengi are no different. That there are marriage contracts. It's not like actual contract for marriage, not what is seen as a marriage contract in, say, Western society, where two people get together, they decide to build a life together, and that there are legal ramifications for ending the agreement depending on the circumstances. So it's interesting how quickly and how dramatic that change over just seasons 5 and 6 in DS9 is shown with the Ferengi, where you're getting a lot more of that female influence in how things are being run. And it all started with Ishka sending a note to the Nagus, giving them advice, during a Tongo tournament.
I want to see. Oh, I want to say one more thing though. With the Ferengi marriage contract, they're entering into a contract with a female. Females aren't allowed to do business. Females aren't allowed to do a lot of other stuff.
You're no, I think the actual signatories for the contract were the groom and the bride's father, or most direct male relation. So, like, say, older brother, or if by some chance both the father and brother sibling have passed away, then an uncle. The agreement, those marriage agreements were made with the essentially the guardian of the female, of the woman. Oh no, Jay, we're getting to that in a bit.
However, with that, I don't recall that actually being the case with that being a necessity of the marriage as it is. I could be I've just missed it.
Well, the female can terminate the marriage. The female can start the process for terminating the contract, but they are not the initiators of the contract. They are essentially a party to it, but they are not the initiating authority.
No, because as we saw with Rom and his first marriage, that got proper fucked up. But that was fucked up by her, essentially, in this case. And something where it screwed him over. But, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure how that business contract works with them. Or if it's something where just her entire family screwed her over and not just her.
I mean, we just gotta remember those rules of acquisition. What was that? What was that about how you treat your family? Yeah, exploit them.
Exploit the ever-living fuck out of them. And it seems to work for the Ferengi. The only race to have actually bought the way into hyperspace, or bought themselves into warp culture or warp society. You kind of have to give them chops for that, though. That's rather impressive.
Well, what's more impressive, the Ferengi getting into warp travel in the grander galactic scale and maintaining their culture as wholeheartedly as they have for as long as they have, or the Packlets?
That's a tough one. I don't feel like we know enough about the Packlets to actually make that decision, or make a informed decision on that. Because we've seen a bit of what the Packlets do. But the Packlets are really fucking vicious. They just hide it really well in some cases. And that's why they don't show it too much. But we've seen the shit with the Packlets where they have been, like in the TNG episode, where they've been really just predatory. Or rather ambush predatory.
And playing the wounded duck to do it too.
Yeah, which That in and of itself is really fucking clever. Sure, they might not be able to outsmart Gowron, but they have had a lot of moments where they have shown more intelligence than what you'd expect from them, even if they aren't really as smart.
They're not traditionally intelligent. There's a cunningness to their stupidity is really a good way to put it, because it's just that there are things and methods that have been shown of theirs that take a cunning, that take an intelligent mind in a certain type of thought process that they've done damn good at. But then there are other things that other species and cultures would deem as kind of a basic necessity that the Packlids at least demonstrate as not being as proficient on, which then feeds into the aforementioned skill and cunning of deceiving people for their own gain.
Yeah, which part of what the Packlids do, and this is something that's very dissimilar to what the Ferengi do. The Packlids, from the beginning, essentially show the enemy or show the person that they try to scam, they show them their belly. They try to make it out that, yeah, they're just vulnerable. They're just such a nice and, frankly, fucking stupid people. They can't do any harm. We don't really need to have a guard up. We don't really need to do anything about it. Just, I don't know, treat them however you want, I guess. But what they then do afterwards, like we saw with Geordie, they take full advantage of it. They take very full advantage of knowing that they get seen as being fucking stupid. And in doing so, they manage to capture him. They manage to avoid the Federation, or the Enterprise rather in this case. And just doing that alone is no mean feat. You have to actually do a fair bit, or have to have a fair bit of knowledge just in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, which is where things get interesting.
Yeah, the Ferengi though, the Ferengi, when they try to fight you, they try to go to the point or the option with the lowest losses for them, mainly financial losses, because you can always get more crewmen. A new ship is quite expensive, but if it's just crewmen who die, you can at least sell off the valuables.
And if they die, you don't necessarily have to pay them.
Yeah, that too. And that's something where you see the Ferengi are. How to put it? The Ferengi are sly, but they often try to circumvent this. They're trying to cheat, they're trying to lie in order to avoid an outright conflict. Because they know that in an outright conflict, they can fight to a certain extent, but they fucking suck at it. They're way better at selling the enemy weapons and then selling another or the enemy's weapons in order to then neutralize them. I do wish, when you say that now, that we knew more about the Packlids. We don't need an entire season focused around them, but something along the lines of what Disney or DS9 did to the Ferengi would be pretty nice.
Yeah, that mixed in exploration of the actual inner workings of their culture and everything. And as long as they don't utilize the Packlet the way that they did Morn, I mean, let's be honest, it would have been nice if finally, at the end of Season 7 of DS9, they actually had Morn say one thing that is actually heard on camera. And let it be something so profound and mind-blowing that not the people on the station, because the people on the station have had conversations with Morn. He would talk your ear off if you let him. But he says something so profound and fitting the moment, and it is so late in the show that the audience is just like, wait, what? He said what?
Yeah, that would be nice. I think that, to be honest, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Star Trek does the best when it explores the small stuff. Not necessarily when you have these grand encounters, but when you explore a microcosm of the events happening in one area.
Exploration of the subtle nuance of reality.
Yeah, because, okay, sure, it's space. Our galaxy is, at least by our measurements, really fucking huge. But you can visit 100 planets, 1,000,000 planets, 1 billion fucking planets, and it can still be boring. But what Star Trek's done is they can take something, as in, they can take a scene that takes place mostly in a cave, and they can make it so engrossing that you really don't need anything more. You don't need anything more than a cheap set. You don't need anything more than a cave. You don't need anything more than a ship. And you can have most of the episode just take place there, exploring these different things with the different people, or the inner workings of, let's call the inner workings of the Dominion. When we come to, where is it? Wave 6?
Or is it 7?
I can't remember. The Vayun that's defective. Just exploring those things, learning that this whole thing isn't set in stone. It's not black and white. Even among the Vorta, the most trusted followers of the founders, you still have issues. You have the issues of, well, them not always believing what's being said. And just one Vayun, sure, it might seem like not that much. But if there's one like that, and then fucking Kevin, being the arsehole that he is, always being a sly arsehole, whereas, well, Vayun is always essentially a calculating arsehole. We can imagine how many of the other clones had to be discarded, or how many of the other clones were removed, were disposed of in one way or another, just to get the ones that we have today.
And you still have issues crop up, like Kevon, and the glitches of that one version of Wayun.
Yeah, and that's something where we can see. I would say that Wayun 6, apart from Wayun 5, are the most rational of them. Wayun 5 is really rational in regards to how he handles his job. He is actually trying to do this in such a way where he can be, well, as cold-hearted and brutal as possible when needed to. But most of the time, he just handles it using, well, politics.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's like the quintessential politician. Compromise where it's beneficial and required, yet compromise in such a way that you can exploit it later.
Yeah. And he's really good at doing it. He's really good at doing all these things in such a way where it doesn't come back to bite him in the ass. He isn't saying something, for example, to the what's it called?
The Jem'Hadar or the
No,
Founders?
the fucks, the spoonful heads,
Oh, the
the
Cardis.
Cardassians. He isn't saying something to the Cardassians, which they in turn could use against him or against the Founders. He isn't saying something towards the what's it called? He isn't saying something to the Federation, which could give away his plans. Other when you have, well, hyper intelligent people around. But other than that, he isn't saying something that could expose his plans in regards to their movements, etc. He's very balanced, and he's also very keen on reaching his goal. But that's something that's been instilled in him by the Founders. He has been, well, literally bred in order to do that. He is a clone. He is made in order to fulfill those roles. He's made to just fit everything like that perfectly. Every single one of him. And then you have the one of him that isn't like that. That essentially says, oh no, this war is probably not actually a good thing.
Yeah, you have one that seemingly has a more evolved conscience.
Yeah. Or at least not as brainwashed as the other ones. And that one tries to get away. Even then, that one still has so much love for the Founders. This unconditional love that he doesn't just suicide. He doesn't try to follow it still. He tries to get away from it. And the person that he defects to is Odo. Another changeling. Another founder. Odo doesn't know what to do with it. But we can still see that Volume 6, or I think it's 6, despite everything, he is still very loyal towards the Founders. He's still loyal towards the Dominion. But he doesn't agree with what the Dominion does. He's willing to give up his life and a lot of secrets in order to protect what he sees the Dominion as being.
Just reading the comment from Terry in the live chat. Conscience, like eyesight, is a trait the Vorta don't need.
Yeah, very much. Well, very much so. Which, when you see Volume 5 try to understand things, just try to understand basic things like art. And you can see him lament the fact that he isn't able to appreciate these things. He isn't able to appreciate art. He isn't able to see what makes this piece good, this piece bad, anything like that. Or when challenged on it or when questioned on it, he defends the Founders. He defends their decisions. Despite him knowing that due to them, he won't actually be able to appreciate the art. He'll never be able to see it the way that anyone else does.
Which really brings a completeness to the character and the portrayal of him. And it really makes me wonder how much of that was just the writers and how much of that was Jeffrey Combs' influence in the character development as well.
I'd say 80% Jeffrey. Because no matter how you look at it, he's a really fucking great actor. Especially when it comes to conveying emotions.
Yeah, he's one of those that can actually go through a full range of emotions and it not come off as soap opera-esque, over the top, or convoluted either, unless it is actually in the moment meant to be that type of disingenuous delivery.
Yeah, and do you think that anyone else there could have actually expressed that the way that William did, or Jeffrey Combs did through William? I'm very tempted to say that his portrayal of William is unique in all those aspects.
Yeah, thinking about the other Vortas that we were introduced to,
Fucking Kevin.
Keevan's not there. The one played by Iggy Pop isn't. I don't think he could have pulled it off either. Maybe one of the female ones? Think her name was Laurel?
Is that the first one?
Second one. Longer hair.
Oh.
First
I don't
one
know.
first one was a bit of a malicious cunt when you really look at it.
Oh, she is a water.
Wow. But I would give it to the second of the female Vorta that we're introduced to. Maybe if they utilized her as a more recurring character, could have gotten something like that. But because they ended up going with Wayoon as the returning, more consistent one, with the others just peppered in here and there as needed. Yeah, I think it really does come down to that is a bit more of an indictment of the writers on that aspect, in my opinion, because, well, the writers in the sense for Kevin, because Kevin, the actor that played him, I think the actor could have pulled it off, but not with that character. And for all the work that Iggy Pop has done going from music into acting, he's still exceptionally stiff and rigid in the characters I've seen him portray, which fit the Vorta that he played perfectly. But that's the only style I've seen him do. I haven't seen the diversity of skill set and character portrayals from him as an actor as we have had with someone like Jeffrey Combs or even Avery Brooks, Cisco. There are actually a lot of actors in Deep Space Nine in the main recurring core that have actually had enough diversity in the characters that they've portrayed in the series and elsewhere that they actually show how adept and how skilled of actors they really are. For as much as O'Brien needs to suffer, Colm Meaney actually is a good actor. Same thing with Alexander Siddig.
Yeah, which sometimes, just sometimes, I feel like some of it is actually wasted. With Jeffrey Combs, in DS9, they utilized him perfectly. They knew what they were using him for, they knew how to use him. And then you have Enterprise, which at that time they knew how to utilize him. But they sure as fuck didn't know how to actually keep up the seasons to go along with him. He was, I'd say, severely underused in Enterprise. Because, let's face it, Shran is a really great character.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't see anyone else playing the role of Shran, but at the same time, with the way the series was going overall, it was... Once they realized what they had in that character, to get the extra appearances and work them into other differing stories, they did it in a way that it worked for the most part. And it just goes to show the difference between the quality coming out of the writer's room. As an actor can make up for less than stellar writing, but you can also handcuff an actor, and at the same time, you can write the most pristine, most amazing script, but if your casting sucks, the show is, and the end product is going to suffer as a result. So there is some give and take, there is some flexibility in just how much influence each piece of the puzzle has on the whole picture, but there are some pieces that can make up for others a lot more than vice versa. I mean, how many very simple, basic stories have been put to film, and yet they're seen as some of the better examples of entertainment simply because of the work of the director and the cast actually taking the story and putting it to film.
Like quite a few. I mean, let's take one of the most simple, basic ones ever. Hardcore Henry. The movie is 99% violence, 0.5% plot, and 0.5% wackiness. It's a very fucking basic plot. It's a revenge plot. Or save and revenge plot. You don't really get much easier than that or much simpler than that with it. But the way that it's executed, yeah, they kept it going. They kept the tempo up as much as needed. They didn't try to waste a lot of time with different things. They didn't try to make the movie into something it wasn't. They used what they knew what they were, and didn't really care about the rest. And the movie was great.
Yeah, and some would even put under that same umbrella the John Wick franchise. It's a very simple story when you actually look at it, but the way it's executed and the quality of the actors that are in it is what makes them as enjoyable to watch as they are. And RNGD Gaming, case in point, Jodie Whittaker in Doctor Who. Fantastic actress, shitty writing.
Let's take another example though. Saving Private Ryan. The entire premise of the movie is go there, get him. That's all there is to it. The way that they then made it, not just visually, because sure the visuals are really great, but being able to portray the story the way that they saw it, being able to go after this whole thing, and showing the humanity of the characters when there is landing, and just showing the horrors really going on at the time. Yeah, I don't think you could really pull it off with any other cast. I don't think that any other cast would be able to understand the roles of the characters enough to actually do it.
Yeah, and give him as much flack as you want for how he does other roles, but Vin Diesel actually worked in that movie.
But that's because he actually had a role. He was a character. He wasn't big dumb muscle guy.
Yeah, there was an actual a genuine and realness to the character he was portraying. It wasn't just there was that extra depth. There was that extra effort from the production staff, from the writing staff, that actually went into making sure that all of these people that you're going to come across throughout this movie, they are just that. They are people. They're not characterizations of things. They're not representing some things. They are people in a tough situation, witnessing horrors firsthand that many people will never see, thankfully. And how do they get through it? How do they still do the mission that they've been given?
That's really something that, well, that's the hardest thing really to do if you want to make a character. How do you make them relatable? How do you make them human enough to actually be able to understand them and their motivations? Because I would argue that you can look at many movies today, and the way that they make their characters is it's black and white to the point that no other human would actually act that way. Comical. It's just not even a stereotype. It's a caricature of what a character should be, or what they should do. And you can see it in their actions. They do not actually do the things that you would expect them to, based on the prior or on the previous behavior. And it isn't explained. It's not something that you get an explanation for it. It's not something where it makes any sense. In some movies, you have that happen. But at the same time, what those movies do is they also explain it afterwards. Like in The Prestige.
Yeah, or you get a build up, you get a setup, and then the implication of that setup, which is the payoff, actually happens and is a payoff that fits with the environment, that fits with the story. Like, shit, call it a B movie, call it a C movie. Yes, it's not a top tier, critically acclaimed movie, but in fucking Tremors, they set something up with the soda cooler that is against the wall in the convenience shop in the first 20-25 minutes of the movie. And it pays off later when that failure, that issue, that excess noise of the compressor kicking on of that cooler attracts the graboid that then comes up from underneath, ripping apart the floor and taking the shop owner in front of everyone. A ridiculously cheap and simple cult classic type of action, sci-fi, horror movie can get that sort of premise right, of a proper setup and then payoff later on that fits in with the story. How often do we get that now?
Very fucking rarely. Which, let's face it, that's not just the only thing that Tremors did right. Bert and Lisa. Wait, is it Lisa? Bert and his wife. Is it Lisa? Linda? I can't remember her name right now. With those two, usually when you see shit like that, even back in the day, when you have someone who's gun-toed and just being macho and stuff like that, they would die right away when shit happens. Essentially as a, see, we told you so. Yeah, you can't be doing that. In this case, they excelled. Sure, they were a bit overconfident, but they killed the graboid. The two of them alone killed the graboid. They survived until the end of the movie. They're even in the fucking movies after this. And you don't really see that either, because for some reason, when it's someone who acts tough, like, well, Bert was doing there and his wife, they get used as an example. They
Yeah,
get used as a cheap, oh, see, they're not so tough now, are they?
they're used as an example of what not to do, and it was Heather Gummer.
Ah, yes.
And even then, that was another thing with the character dynamics throughout that movie. You have them where they were prepared, they were able to do it, but they didn't know certain things and they ended up making mistakes and still having to deal with the consequences of those mistakes, but also coming up with some rather ingenious methods to help them further the group along. Like the explosives.
Yeah. And that's something where I can't say that we're ever going to have a real situation like that. But I'd say that movie has some of the most real reactions from characters that you'd actually expect in that kind of situation or in that scenario. You wouldn't expect it to be something where everyone's hyper rational. You wouldn't expect it really to be something where everyone panics. Because different people are, after all, different people. You're going to have the people who are really, really cool, collected. You're going to have the people who are completely batshit, trying to just get away from it. You will have different groups of different people, and they'll all react differently. And the movie showed that. Some of them panicked. Some of them just didn't know what to do. There was one guy who was so fucking scared that he was sitting up at, was it a telephone pole or electric pole? One of them. He was sitting up on a pole for 4 days until he died. Just because he was so fucking scared.
The paralyzation of fear.
Yeah. And it's something that I feel like that shows up so well in that movie. It shows up that, or it shows that you have real emotions. It's not just, oh yes, I'm so scared I'm going to scream, and then nothing more. It's not something where you have someone who's always really fucking scared, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, I'm not scared anymore. No, I'm going to do this. No, the characters are consistent. They're acting like people. And that's fucking rare nowadays. Not as rare, but well, back in the day when the movie was made. But it's still rare. And just taking it back to DS9, or Star Trek in general in DS9, mostly DS9. DS9 has a lot of these characters. Kinds of characters that are real, essentially, that grow throughout the series. Like Nog, a Ferengi who joins the Federation or joins Starfleet. A Ferengi, one of the, let's say, not bravest of species, putting his life on the line physically for something that he believes in.
Yeah.
That's essentially unheard of when it comes to Ferengi otherwise. Yet he does it.
Well, not just him, even his father, Rom. Rom left the business, stopped working for his brother to work on the maintenance crew of the station, where it's never really said how much or if at all that he got paid by comparison to if he was working for his brother and actually getting latinum, actually getting some monetary gain from it. Which you have those characters that stay true to themselves but still grow. Like even Nog, even with all his zeal, his zest, his gung-ho attitude, when they're stuck on a planet and he got severely injured to where he lost a leg and then had it replaced surgically. He took a long time to deal with that. Not so much physically, but the mental aspect of it. And they actually showed that and actually explored that in the series. And it took an aware hologram to finally fully get through to him. That helped him get over the major hurdle that he had following the injury, the rehab, and then rejoining the crew on the station and on the Defiant. Sometimes what you need isn't going to come from a typical or predictable place. That was something that DS9 has actually been able to show wonderfully throughout its run, that sometimes what you need to hear isn't going to come from the source that you expect.
Bring the source you want.
Yeah. Which, on the flip side of that, fucking cunt Win, I mean Kai Win. Either that actress is a damn good actress, or is a really terrible person. Because
Yeah, she makes you want to kick her fucking teeth in.
yeah, it is saying something that when you portray a character that you can still say is a genuine person, is not a character of a person, but is, you could still see someone like that existing in reality, and they elicit the type of reaction where you wouldn't mind seeing that person come to physical harm to some extent. They're doing a very, very good job at portraying that character. Is like same thing with the actor who played Joffrey in Game of Thrones. Joffrey was an asshole. Joffrey was a monster of a person. And the actor played that well, but from all accounts, he is one of the nicest people you could ever meet. And yet was able to convincingly play that character in that way that people, a general public people, thought that he was a horrendous person.
Yep.
Finding that sort of talent and actually fostering and supporting that kind of talent is, it's not uncommon, but it needs to be handled so much better than it has in recent times. Just because an actor can portray a character you don't like, it's just that. They are portraying a character. The actor is not that person that you hate.
But this is something too, which it's an example that I've seen a lot when it comes to Kai Wynn, and the comparison between her and Umbridge from Harry Potter. I think out of the two, Kai Wynn is the most horrible one. It's the most vile one, the most vicious one. Because she exists. We all know a Kai Wynn, the kind of low-level evil bitch who tries to do anything just in order to get their way. Be it something where they lie about you, something where they lie directly to your face, where they're being sneaky cunts about some shit, where they're being gaslighting, all those things. We know a person like that. And that she's so brazenly doing right in your face too. We know that kind of person. Umbridge is someone that you can hate, but not as a real person. Umbridge is like trying to distill all those qualities and then stripping away the personality, or the core personality, outside of being just a cunt.
Yeah. And I think really what to me what sets the two characters apart was Kaiwyn is supposed to be the preeminent religious leader amongst her people. And yet she is so intolerant and so jealous of the emissary, of Cisco, because here is this human, here is this non-Bajoran that has had numerous encounters with the prophets. And still, we are at the end of season 6, and she still has never interacted with the prophets. The prophets don't speak to her, but they speak to this alien. They care about this alien and not me, one of their people. Sorry, that is a complete different level of horrendous person to have that sort of animosity, especially coming from that type of place. And
do we really think, though, there's jealousy?
Because he can also undermine her position because of that relationship to the prophets. She threatens her position and her authority when he chooses to. She does not have control over him.
And I think that's the main part, though. Control. Everything with Kaiwyn is about control. Nothing that she does is something that she would want to do if she didn't have control. Her main shtick with everything is that she can do it while having control. If it's something like being an asshole to people, or something just using her power to do whatever the fuck, she can do it with impunity as the Kai. But she can't control him. So I don't think that's jealousy at all.
Well, jealousy because he has more influence in areas that she believes she should be the preeminent voice. He has something she does not have. If she had actually interacted with the prophets, even just once, well, she has that too. She's had conversations with the prophets. She has interacted with the prophets. So she could leverage that to her gain to further what she actually wants. And that's the thing. Ultimately, it boils down to power and control that results from it. And he is a threat to that because of things that he has done and has been able to do that she either hasn't or has failed at or has just outright been denied. Because Kaiwyn has had a couple orb experiences, but never has she interacted with the prophets. Like even Kira. Kira hasn't actually interacted with the prophets, but she's had a couple orb experiences. So you have that disparity where the Kai's experience and what she can use to justify her place in the position she's in and everything is no different than a commoner. And yet this alien shows up and is automatically given favor by my gods to have a direct connection and conversation with and name this heathen their emissary? That is rather insulting to someone of, shall we say, her prestige and birthright. Yes, I'm calling it now. Kai Wynn is a fucking racist. Which actually leads into the motivation. And Kira called this out at the end of that episode. Kira Nerys called out Kai Wynn that she was offended that the emissary, that Captain Sisko, an off-worlder, had more faith in the prophets than she does.
I'm still gonna say xenophobe.
Yeah, okay. That works too.
It's not because he's black, it's because he's a human.
Yeah.
No, but she is a really great character, though.
Oh,
And
yeah.
even something like, take a character that can come across as somewhat cartoonish at times. Gul Dukat.
That's where I thought you were going.
Sometimes he can come over as just not larger than life. What's the word?
Over the top. Very cartoonish.
So self-assured that he doesn't seem real. But at the same time, we see things about him. We see things in the way that he acts that justifies that in his character. We know that he is really insecure. We know that he has a lot of unresolved issues. So many things that are just fucked up. Even losing his daughter, which was something that did affect him properly, he had to overcome it. Not really for his daughter's sake, but so that he could feel superior again. So that he could feel like he was something that he wasn't. He could feel like a hero. So that he could feel like the savior of Cardassia. So he could get a statue.
So people could see him for how he truly is and how he truly deserves to be remembered.
Oh, yes.
Because remember, it is not just to win and defeat your enemy on the field of battle. To truly win is to make them realize they were wrong to ever challenge you in the first place.
Yep. But even that cartoonish character, even with how he was doing so many things, is still a really deep and interesting character. Gul Dukat is a complex motherfucker. And if you compare him to any modern Trek character, they pale in comparison. There's nothing that can even come close to Gul Dukat.
Wait, no, I will contend that there is one character that is just as cartoonish, but is still a failure of execution, but is to the point of being unbelievable and actually in that self-importance and, shall we say, morally and ethically flawed. Burnham. Michael Burnham is just an acceptable version of Gul Dukat in a Starfleet uniform.
So what you're saying is Michael Burnham is to STD what, or rather to Star Trek in general, what Gul Dukat was to Cardassia.
Yes.
You know, if I had to choose to rely on either of them, I think I would choose Dukat.
Yeah, you'll have less hysterics and random crying bits of overstressedness before they hit the ultimate MacGuffin button to save the day, because if Mikey Spock can't do it, no one can.
Just the power of mathematics. Oh, fuck that shit. Nah, no. Also, let's face it, Gul Dukat was never rude to a janitor.
No, only a tailor.
And the tailor could have, well, at any fucking time there, have stabbed him in the neck, gouged not his eye out, or eyes out, and made his body disappear before anyone could say, plain and simple. That tailor was hardly
Was not
innocent or
was not your typical tailor.
no, neither innocent nor helpless.
But he is just what Cardassia needed.
Yeah, and I think that's really the part with so many of the Cardassians that I think that people overlook. Most of the Cardassians do this kind of shit because they love Cardassia. Outside of Gul Dukat, most of the Cardassians that we see do actually love Cardassia. They do love their home. They love the planet. And they see this as a necessary evil, essentially, in order to further their home. To keep the home being a good place.
They're doing it for the state, not personal gain and acclaim. But Dukat was all about the personal gain.
He didn't care at all about state. I'd say, take something like Maritza, because I actually remember his fucking name now. Even he, in trying to essentially commit suicide by Federation, or by mob, he was caring more about the state of Cardassia. He was caring more about the people, about everything there. Seeing the moral corruption that came from what's essentially a concentration camp at the time. He saw that and he realized, no, this isn't Cardassia. This isn't right. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be rectified. But in not knowing how to do it, he wanted to give up an icon of that concentration camp. He wanted to amend for his sins or pay for his sins by having himself be sacrificed. That's the most vile thing he could imagine at the time. Maritza. And yet, he still loved Cardassia. He loved Cardassia to the point where he wanted that done.
He felt it was necessary for something symbolic like that to happen, for Cardassia, for the people to move on and move forward and grow after the occupation, and not fall into the trap that they ultimately did, partly because of Dukat, and succumb to the promises of the Dominion, which did not go well.
Yeah, and with that, with the Dominion and everything there, that was more trying to chase it to become something greater than they were. Not just for the state, but I want to show that I can do this so really well. I can beat the odds. I can become a great ruler here. We can do it well, so I can get a statue. Um, that really just fucked over Cardassia. Bad. And so many other Cardassians saw it. Damar finally saw it. What's his face? Garrick saw it. Maritza saw it. Well, he died before that actually happened, but he saw where it was heading.
Yep. And Auburn Tane knew where it was going, knew the threat.
Yep. They knew it. They knew that if it kept going like that, they would be fucked. And they tried their best to keep Cardassia a good place. At least for Cardassians on Cardassia. But they tried to do it for Cardassia. They didn't do it under personal pretenses. They didn't do it as something where they felt it necessary to try to lie and cheat to gain more land or power in other places. Even something like the Bajoran occupation was something that was fairly recent. Something that, well, as we can see, many saw as a mistake. It's something that should not have happened.
And then you have those like Ducat who tried to capitalize off of it, all under the guise of, oh, but I was making it better for the Bajorans.
Oh, yes. I made it better. They didn't have to suffer, but then they bombed my factory, and then I had to make an example.
They made me do this.
Yeah, I didn't have any choice. What should I have done? And that's a great justification for the antagonist just to do shit. Because we also see that in real life. Or the whole complying with orders that you find objectionable. Because if you don't, you're gonna die. Or if you don't do it, you will be seen as a traitor. Even something where those people who you would perhaps have agreed with before, they turn out to be assholes. They turn out to be, in your view, the villains.
And once you make someone a villain, it then becomes so easy to dehumanize them and justify any behavior towards them.
Yeah, well, they didn't know any better. They were just being these assholes. So we had to group them up. We had to put them in the paddy wagon because they were acting poorly. We had to do this because they can't help themselves. We had to do this for their own sake. And sadly, that's something that carries on in, well, all manners of human society still today.
Yeah, you still have people justifying piss poor behavior by blaming others. You know, it's not that they made a poor choice. They're just reacting to this situation. So just remember that, everyone. Anytime you hear someone try to justify behavior that they have done by pointing at another person as, well, I'm just doing what they've done, really, really give it a good hard look at it. Because chances are they're lying to you. And it's not that the ends justify the means. It's they're finally showing you just how much of a shit person they really are. But they don't want to lose you as a viewer, as a supporter, as a source of money.
Yeah, because if you do certain things, like, well, if you commit a crime towards someone, and then you claim that, oh yeah, but it's justified because that person hurt someone that I care for. Why, in that case, if it's someone that's hurt someone else, do you do it in such a way? If it's something that you find unclear, why don't you try to clear it up? If it's something where someone is legitimately actually hurting someone on any platform or anywhere, why in that case not actually take action through the platform? Why do you feel the need to personally attack someone? Or is it that the person you're trying to protect, or quote unquote protect, wasn't actually attacked? And this is just you and your behavior and how you feel about people that you can find a vent in this case under the guise of protecting.
Yeah, it's always the mental gymnastics are always fascinating when you pay attention to the telltale markers of them all. And bravo to the fantasy fiction and sci-fi writers that are able to craft characters and actually have motivations that complex and that real, conveyed in a way that is not a joke, a laughing stock, or otherwise mishandled.
Which, well, if we want to look at modern comics and all that stuff, we're losing more and more of those people every day. It reminds me, did you see the thing about the new X-Men reboot of the 90s cartoon?
The only thing I've seen is the request that we get as many glorious and gratuitous shots of Rogue, which that part I would have to agree with.
We got a lot of those in the old show, though. Or they're all dressed. Or they were majority dressed. Well, there's Rogue, there's Ghibli, I'm pretty sure she's legal too. There's Storm. And for
Jean.
those who are into it, second,
Jean.
yeah. And for those who are into it, there's also Mr. Beast.
Yeah, that is one thing. There are people who are like, oh my god, they sexualized this character. Yeah, I think about the only characters that weren't sexualized, I would have to say would be Sinister and Apocalypse.
No, even then, Sinister is wearing skin-tight leather, which essentially is his skin in many cases.
Fair point. So yeah, you do have that allure to bondage.
Yeah, and Apocalypse is, as far as I recall, wearing, what's it, spandex? Something like that. Which means that the only one that isn't properly sexualized of the main characters and main crew is Professor Xavier. Which I find actually, since I am all for the whole inclusivity shit and all that stuff, he should also be sexualized. We should not be mean towards disabled people. He deserves to wear, I don't know, a spandex suit or, I don't know, Speedos, some shit like that too. A see-through wheelchair. We can do it. He deserves it.
And they went with a slimmed down wheelchair in the live action movie. So there is a precedent.
But he didn't bare his legs.
Oh, we could get Picard to show a little ankle.
do we really want Picard to? Oh, yeah, Picard to keep being Professor Xavier though. I liked him in Old Man Logan.
Yeah,
But
I was going to say, if we're going to get the version and portrayal from the first couple movies that he did the role, yes. If he's going to deliver it like he has his last couple outings at work, no.
now, because something that I feel is a missing point when it comes to all these things, especially when it comes to people looking at old cartoons and stuff like that. Sexualization isn't necessarily something that's just a product of, oh yes, we want to make this character sexy. It's also way fucking easier if you don't have a lot of jackets or intricate details hanging loosely. If you just draw, say, the shape of a man or a woman, and then draw the lines on for clothes, that's way fucking easier than putting an entire suit on or
Yeah,
putting a scarf on.
yeah, there is that bit of simplicity in essentially having them all in leotards instead of slacks, shorts, boots, tennis shoes. I mean, once you get into clothing that has more detail to it and more flow to it, it is going to be difficult, especially for the art style and anime of the time. Now, if they try to do it in mostly CG, they could get around that. But I have my doubts on them being able to present it in any sort of competent manner. At this point, my default position for a lot of these reworked material is that it's going to be absolute garbage. Until shown otherwise, that will be my initial expectation. Is that when they are redoing a product, when they're redoing a franchise that already has a basis, that already has a foundation, I'm expecting them to screw it up.
Yeah, actually, I would be okay if they were to make a soft revamp, I guess you could call it, of the X-Men franchise. Well, not franchise, but the X-Men 90s cartoon. And just do something where you keep the beats from the original series, you just straight up fucking take the sound effects.
Yeah.
Or you just touch up the graphics a little bit.
Yeah, just touch up the art a little bit. You don't have to do a massive remake. You don't have to do a total overhaul, because there were things that cartoon series got right that the later live action movies just completely took a crap on. Like the origin of Phoenix and then the Dark Phoenix saga that followed it. Phoenix did not come out of a fucking lake.
Not unless her name is Excalibur.
Well, no, that was actually one thing that I enjoyed from the cartoon series, is when they had that arc where the X-Men actually had to go extraterrestrial, where they actually had to leave Earth for a bit, and it was while they were in space that they ran into the entity that is the Phoenix, and that is what, for lack of a better term, abducted Jean Grey's body, because Jean Grey, being the strong telekinetic And being the type of mutation that she was a prime target for a being like the Phoenix. That actually fit the lore and fit everything so much better and made for a better story than, oh, she was sacrificing herself and she was going to die, but then this thing came in and took over her body. So it's not really Jean, it's not really her. Give me a fucking break.
Well, the X-Men movies did fuck up a lot of things in general, though. Which, I must admit, I liked the first X-Men movie because it was quite novel. They were trying to get the beats, and so they're based a lot more just on the cartoon, on the what's it called, on the comics. It based so much more on those, and then tried to make it all entirely its own thing or their own thing. And I really liked it.
And then they went
Simply
off
put-
the rails.
Yeah, but they tried to make it into something that it isn't. X-Men is, well, it has a few core beats. The overarching thing, or the main thing to look out for, is essentially human mutant relations. That's the core thing, really, of the X-Men franchise. But then outside of that, everything builds on the characters' own stories. Logan's story. What's his name? Remy LaRue? Oh. Gambit's story.
Remy.
Yeah, I can't remember his last name, though. It doesn't
LeBeau.
matter. LeBeau. Yeah.
Remy LeBeau.
Well, you have those things there where their stories are important to the whole thing. You have these things that are, they're slowly set up over the comics, slowly set up over the cartoons, where you start to actually get to know these people as proper characters. Sure, it can change that more drastically from not just one issue to the next, but from one telling of the story of their universe to the next. But usually within those tiny universes, within those story arcs, they're consistent. They're actually something where they do act like people would do in their cases, just given that they have superhuman powers. They're not something that you wouldn't be surprised at seeing this kind of shit happening in real life apart from the powers. Like Logan having a fucking permit to go through airports without having to stand in a metal detector. Or just shit like that. The mundane parts of actually being a mutant. Or, what's his face? Fantastic Four, the guy that sets himself on fire.
Oh, the Human Torch.
Yes, that guy. He doesn't wash. Because why would he? He sets himself on fire. Shit won't survive.
Just go ahead and flame on, and hey, instant sanitization.
Yeah. And that's something like, you see those kinds of things happening, and you see them actually being human in it. Like in, I can't remember what episode of X-Men it was. I was like fucking 12 when I saw it. Logan is outside chopping wood with his claws. Because he can. So why wouldn't he? It's just something that to him, that's fucking normal. There's nothing more to it. And yeah, we don't really have that now. We don't have normal characters that just happen to have superpowers. We have characters with superpowers that just do superhero, supervillain things all the time. Just us.
Now, I will say this, though, for the X-Men franchise, the most real moment that we got from any group of them was actually in X-Men First Class, the prequel, with Fassbender as a younger Magneto. The scene where they're in the bunker and just goofing around because they're younger, energetic, and they're in an environment where they can finally actually embrace their mutations. So they start playing around and doing it. That scene, which was towards the end of the training scene, the training montages, made a lot of sense, and it worked given the situation, that there was a bit of realism there, where you have Mystique, you have a younger version of her wanting, her main thing was seeking acceptance, being accepted and loved and appreciated for who she was, that she felt that she wasn't getting from Xavier. And she manipulated that situation to get people to, no, just be yourself, just go ahead, show what you can do. And that scene, that bit of a party and goofing off for people in their late teens, early 20s, makes a lot of sense and actually works. But then you have other aspects of it where in the franchise it didn't work. When you go other parts of that movie, like when they go to Russia and what's her nuts is there, the chickie who can turn herself into diamonds, or essentially one large anamorphic sentient diamond. You have things like that just then throw a wrench into everything. So you have those flashes that can work, that if they had more of that in there, if they had more of those character building moments in there, the story probably would have been a hell of a lot better.
But that would also be hard, because that means you have to write a story that you can't make $200, $300, $400 million of when you post it in China.
This is true.
There's just so much of that shit, though, which, as I've mentioned before, I would be completely okay with something like, say, a Star Trek-esque episode of some show that takes place in a single room, as long as you have that kind of character building, as long as you have that kind of story there. It doesn't have to be flashy, it doesn't have to be a lot of CGI, it doesn't have to be all over the place action all the fucking time. Give me something that's actually interesting. If you want them to slap one another, sure, go for it. But don't make that the main crux of it. Don't make it uninteresting. Don't make it boring.
Yeah, have a proper framework, a proper setup, an actual progression. Because I'm losing count. I'm losing track of the number of times I've said this, but give us a good story, and the rest of the details don't really matter. You don't have to put as much effort into the visuals, into representation, into whatever little details that you want to harp on. if you're telling a good story, your characters can be whatever you want them to be. But when the characters and what they are is more important than who they are, you've lost. You've lost the interest of the majority of the audience. You've lost the capability to actually tell a good, coherent story at that point.
As can be seen by the interview with Avery Brooks. Did he find it interesting to play the first black captain or first black male captain on Star Trek? How did he portray it? Or what did he want to get out of portraying the first black captain? And then pointing out, it's not about being the black captain. He is a captain. He's an excellent captain. He is really great at actually dealing with these men. He is someone that they feel like they can empathize with. He is a great father. He's trying to keep everything in his family and everything like that just together and doing his best every day. And secondary to that, he just happens to be black. Being black isn't his character. His character just happens to be black.
Yeah. If only more people could actually look at things that way. Maybe humanity would have a chance at survival at that point.
Yeah, but that would actually mean that you can't just look at skin color and say, this is good, this is bad.
Yeah, because
that's hard.
Because heaven forbid you actually have to put some effort and discernment into your evaluation of situations and things that are going on. Because that is true skepticism, and skepticism is hard.
Yeah, but it's so much easier just to say that this character is black, so therefore he must be good, because we can't have a bad black character now, can we? Having a bad black character, or antagonist rather, we can't do that because that's racist. We can't let the people see that people can be people regardless of their skin color.
But wouldn't it be racist also to have all of your antagonists, all of your bad guys, be white, male, cisgendered, heterosexuals?
No, because we know that white males are the majority of the population everywhere. We can tell that because everyone gets called a minority. Be it white women, be it black men, be it black women, everyone else is a minority. That just means that the only one that can be an antagonist is a white male. As can be seen in Black Widow.
Or Batwoman.
Or anyone else of, well, the fucking plethora of them that's come out now.
Yeah, you know what? There's a homework assignment for the audience. Go watch any of the shows that are really touted nowadays as great works or works worth watching. Even go look at the reboot that they put Queen Latifah in as the Equalizer. I think that's what it is. Go ahead and count the number of times that you're introduced to a new character that happens to be a white male, and count how many of the times that said new character is the bad guy. You just might be in for a bit of a surprise.
Just don't make it into a drinking game.
Yeah, I don't want anyone's liver function to be overly damaged from going that route with it. But if you are looking for liver damage, stick around, because in 30 minutes or so, we're going to be back, and oh boy, is it going to get ratcheted up a notch, because who knows what other topics the other assholes are going to bring up. But until then, we're going to take a break. I'm going to go get something to eat. I don't know what Leon's going to do, but we'll be back on air in just a few. We'll see you then.
Bye.